are significant throughout the Himalayas. Temperatures fall by 0.2 to 1.2 degrees Celsius for every 100 m, 330 feet, rise in altitude. This gives rise to a variety of climates, from a nearly tropical climate in the foothills, to tundra and permanent snow and ice at higher elevations. Local climate is also affected by the topography. The leeward side of the mountains receive less rain while the well-exposed slopes get heavy rainfall, and the rain shadow of large mountains can be significant, for example, leading to near-desert conditions in the Upper Mustang, which is sheltered from the monsoon rains by the Annapurna and Dhaulagiri massifs and has annual precipitation of around 300 mm, 12 in, while Pokhara on the southern side of the massifs has substantial rainfall, 3,900 mm or 150 in a year. Thus, although annual precipitation is generally higher in the east than in the west, local variations are often more important. The Himalayas have a profound effect on the climate of the Indian subcontinent and the Tibetan plateau. They prevent frigid, dry winds from blowing south into the subcontinent, which keeps South Asia much warmer than corresponding temperate regions in the other continents. It also forms a barrier for the monsoon winds, keeping them from traveling northwards, and causing heavy rainfall in the Terai region. The Himalayas are also believed to play an important part in the formation of Central Asian deserts, such as the Taklamakan and Gobi. Climate Change, edit. This section is an excerpt from Hindu Kush Climate Change. Edit. The 2019 Hindu Kush Himalaya assessment concluded that between 1901 and 2014, the Hindu Kush Himalaya, or HKH, region had already experienced warming of 0.1 degrees Celsius per decade, with the warming rate accelerating to 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade over the past 50 years. Over the past 50 years, the frequency of warm days and nights had also increased by 1.2 days and 1.7 nights per decade, while the frequency of extreme warm days and nights had increased by 1.26 days and 2.54 nights per decade. There was also a corresponding decline of 0.5 cold days, 0.85 extreme cold days, 1 cold night, and 2.4 extreme cold nights per decade. The length of the growing season has increased by 4.25 days per decade. There is less conclusive evidence of light precipitation becoming less frequent, while heavy precipitation became both more frequent and more intense. Finally, since 1970s, glaciers have retreated everywhere in the region beside Karakoram, eastern Pamir, and western Kunlun, where there has been an unexpected increase in snowfall. Glacier retreat had been followed by an increase in the number of glacial lakes, some of which may be prone to dangerous floods. In the future, if the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming is not exceeded, warming in the HKH will be at least 0.3 degrees Celsius higher, and at least 0.7 degrees Celsius higher in the hotspots of northwest Himalaya and Karakoram. If the Paris Agreement goals are broken, then the region is expected to warm by 1.7-2.4 degrees C in the near future, 2036-2065, and by 2.23.3 degrees C, 2066-2095, near the end of the century under the Intermediate Representative Concentration Pathway 4.5, RCP 4.5. Under the high warming RCP 8.5 scenario, where the annual emissions continue to increase for the rest of the century, the expected regional warming is 2.33.2 degrees C and 4.26.5 degrees C, respectively. Under all scenarios, winters will warm more than the summers, and the Tibetan Plateau, the central Himalayan range, and the Karakoram will continue to warm more than the rest of the region. Climate change will also lead to the degradation of up to 81% of the region's permafrost by the end of the century. Future precipitation is projected to increase as well, but CMIP-5 models struggle to make specific projections due to the region's topography. The most certain finding is that the monsoon precipitation in the region will increase by 4.12% in the near future and by 4.25% in the long term. There has also been modeling of the changes in snow cover, but it is limited to the end of century under the RCP 8.5 scenario. It projects declines of 30–50% in the Indus Basin, 50–60% in the Ganges Basin, and 50–70% in the Brahmaputra Basin, as the snow-lean elevation in these regions will rise by between 4.4 and 10.0 m/yr. There has been more extensive modeling of glacier trends. It is projected that 1/3 of all glaciers in the extended HKH region will be lost by 2100 even if the warming is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius, with over half of that loss in the eastern Himalaya region, while RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5 are likely to lead to the losses of 50% and 67% of the region's glaciers over the same time frame. Glacier melt is projected to accelerate regional river flows until the amount of meltwater peaks around 2060, going into an irreversible decline afterwards. Since precipitation will continue to increase even as the glacier meltwater contribution declines, annual river flows are only expected to diminish in the western basins where contribution from the monsoon is low. However, irrigation and hydropower generation would still have to adjust to greater intra-annual variability and lower pre-monsoon flows in all of the region's rivers. Ecology, edit. Main article, Ecology of the Himalayas. The flora and fauna of the Himalayas vary with climate, rainfall, altitude, and soils. The climate ranges from tropical at the base of the mountains to permanent ice and snow at the highest elevations. The amount of yearly rainfall increases from west to east along the southern front of the range. This diversity of altitude, rainfall, and soil conditions, combined with the very high snow line, supports a variety of distinct plant and animal communities. The extremes of high altitude, low atmospheric pressure, combined with extreme cold, favor extremophile organisms. At high altitudes, the elusive and previously endangered snow leopard is the main predator. Its prey includes members of the goat family grazing on the alpine pastures and living on the rocky terrain, notably the endemic barrel or Himalayan blue sheep. The Himalayan musk deer is also found at high altitudes. Hunted for its musk, it is now rare and endangered. Other endemic or near-endemic herbivores include the Himalayan tara, the taking, the Himalayan sero, and the Himalayan goral. The critically endangered Himalayan subspecies of the brown bear is found sporadically across the range, as is the Asian black bear. In the mountainous mixed deciduous and conifer forests of the eastern Himalayas, red pandas feed in the dense understories of bamboo. Lower down, the forests of the foothills are inhabited by several different primates, including the endangered Gee's golden langur and the Kashmir grey langur, with highly restricted ranges in the east and west of the Himalayas, respectively. The unique floral and faunal wealth of the Himalayas is undergoing structural and compositional changes due to climate change. Hydrangea hirta is an example of floral species that can be found in this area. The increase in temperature is shifting various species to higher elevations. The oak forest is being invaded by pine forests in the Garhwal Himalayan region. There are reports of early flowering and fruiting in some tree species, especially rhododendron, apple, and box myrtle. The highest known tree species in the Himalayas is Juniperus tibetica, located at 4,900 m, 16,080 feet, in southeastern Tibet. This section is an excerpt from Hindu Kush Flora and Fauna. Edit. The mountainous areas of Hindu Kush range are mostly barren or, at the most, sparsely sprinkled with trees and stunted bushes. From about 1,300 to 2,300 m, 4,300 to 7,500 feet, states Yashata, sclerophyllous forests are predominant with quercus and wild olive. Above that, up to a height of about 3,300 m, 10,800 feet, one finds coniferous forests with cedrus, piscia, abies, pinus, and junipers. The inner valleys of the Hindu Kush see little rain and have desert vegetation. On the other hand, eastern Himalaya is home to multiple biodiversity hotspots, and 353 new species, 242 plants, 16 amphibians, 16 reptiles, 14 fish, 2 birds, 2 mammals and 61 plus invertebrates have been discovered therein between 1998 and 2008, with an average of 35 new species finds every year. With eastern Himalaya included, the entire Hindu Kush Himalaya region is home to an estimated 35,000 plus species of plants and 200 plus species of animals. Climate justice, edit. Similar to the mountains, the communities living near the Himalayas are experiencing climate change and its negative impacts significantly more than other parts of the world. Some of the impacts that the communities are facing include erratic rainfall, flooding, rising temperatures, and landslides. These impacts can have extreme negative effects on the villagers living in the area, especially as the temperatures rise at higher rates than many other places in the world. Alexander et al., 2014. There are more than 1.9 million people who are highly vulnerable due to climate change, with an additional 10 million people at risk in Nepal. Nepal is among the top 10 most vulnerable global south countries due to climate change in the world, standing at number 4 as of 2010 according to the Climate Change Risk Atlas. According to NAPA, National Adaptation Program of Action, of Nepal, many threats including floods, droughts, and landslides are an imminent threat to the glacial lake area. With this in consideration, Climate Change Policy and Framework for LAPA, Local Adaptation Plans of Action, were prepared in 2011 primarily focusing on addressing climatic hazards. Health impacts, edit. Local communities are suffering from food scarcity and malnutrition, as well as an increasing risk to diseases such as malaria and dengue fever as temperatures rise and allow these diseases to migrate further north. There is also an increasing risk of waterborne illnesses accompanied by an increasing lack of safe drinking water. Illness is not the only danger to the communities as temperatures skyrocket. With the climate changing, weather patterns are also changing and more extreme weather events are occurring, putting local communities more at risk to physical harm and death during erratic weather events. Marginalized groups including children and women are experiencing more severe impacts from climate change and are often more exposed to disease and injury. Over the last couple years, these health impacts have gotten increasingly worse and more common. Recent studies have shown that dengue fever has had a consistent pattern of epidemic in Nepal in the years 2010, 2013, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2022, with the largest in terms of severity occurring in 2022. 54,784 reported cases were recorded from all 77 districts in 7 provinces. These diseases are simply in addition to other diseases that can be seen with the rise of global temperatures and air pollution. Many vulnerable groups are experiencing an increase in respiratory illness, cardiac illnesses, and asthma. The heat can lead to issues such as a strain on respiratory illnesses, heat stroke, and fever. There is also the increased risk of cancer. Many lower-income communities such as the Himalayan villages suffer from exposure to more pollution or in some cases exposure to toxic chemicals, which has led to an increased rate of cancer in these communities as well as an increased risk of death. Agricultural impacts, edit. The increasing temperatures are also leading to a decrease in territory for local wildlife. This has led to a decrease in prey for at-risk predators such as snow leopards. This has led to a negative relationship between local farmers and the wildlife as snow leopards and other predators attack the farmers' livestock. This livestock consists of yaks, oxen, horses, and goats. Snow leopards have killed about 2.6% of the local livestock per year in response to their decreasing habitat. This has had a major impact on the local economy, leading to the loss of about a quarter of the average annual income of the local farmers. This has led to farmers then killing the snow leopards in retaliation in order to protect their livestock and their livelihoods. Policy changes, edit. Nepal is a part of the Paris Agreement and thus is required to have a climate action plan and is being tracked by the Climate Action Tracker. According to the Climate Action Tracker, Nepal is almost sufficient on its track to reach the goals set by the Paris Agreement. There are two factors that hold Nepal back from reaching sufficient status and thus stand out. There is no climate finance plan and emissions and temperature rising rate ranking at critically insufficient. Nepal has many goals, however, that are on track with the Paris Agreement. The first of note being a goal of net zero emissions by 2045. To reach this goal, Nepal submitted two separate plans to account for whatever future they experience, the first being WAM, with additional measures, and the second being WEM, with existing measures. WEM is based primarily on already existing policies and highlights the energy sector as the main target for CO2 reduction. The WAM scenario introduces a far more ambitious strategy for reducing emissions. In this scenario, the focus is primarily on an intervention method and disruption of the energy sector, reducing the use of fossil fuels and the incorporation of renewable energy sources. This pathway heavily relies on reducing emissions from energy sources while preserving the carbon-absorbing capacity of the LULUCF, land use change and forestry, sector. Under this scenario, it is anticipated that net CO2 emissions will remain negative from 2020 to 2030, approach zero between 2035 and 2045, and then revert to negative values by 2050. The goal of this scenario is to accelerate the journey toward achieving carbon neutrality before 2045. These policies, along with many more, have Nepal on track to stay beneath the 1.5 threshold set by the Paris Agreement. Local adaptation, edit. In recent years, many citizens of these Himalayan communities have started to notice the extreme effects of climate change by experiencing nature itself. They have noticed a decrease in precipitation, especially in lowland districts, fluctuating temperatures during months of the year that are typically cooler, and changes in weather patterns even compared to early 2000s weather. Many local villagers have identified climate change simply through the availability of certain native plants decreasing or shifting seasons. The concept of climate change has now been aligned with the risk of natural disasters and has increased awareness in the local communities. These impacts of climate change have greatly affected agriculture in the area and has forced farmers to change crops and when they plant them. In response to this, rather than push for policy change, citizens have begun to adapt to climate change. According to Tungana, 91.94% of the respondents experienced drought as major climatic hazards, then floods at 83.87%, landslides at 70.97%, and forest fires at 67.74%. In response to this, citizens have begun adapting and adopting new practices. As a response to drought at the high altitudes, plantations are planting more protective trees, drought-resistant plants, and have begun adopting irrigation practices drawing from nearby streams. In response to flooding, farmers have created more basins, dam construction, and small drainage canals. The response to landslides includes plantation grasses in previously barren areas, gabion wall construction, avoiding livestock grazing in landslide-prone areas, and a prohibition on tillage in areas at risk of landslides. To fight the increased rate of forest fires, citizens have begun beating the fires with green branches and mud, construction of fire lines, and are raising awareness about the wildfires. Fire lines are lines of varying width built through the leaf litter of a forest floor down to the soil and minerals to prevent a spread of fire past the line. The main reason for these adaptations is to decrease the risk that climate change poses over these marginalized communities while taking advantage of the moment and allowing for a positive change towards a more sustainable or adaptable future. Major barriers to these adaptations include a lack of funds, a lack of knowledge, a lack of technology, a lack of time, and lack of mandatory policy. Religions, edit. There are many cultural and mythological aspects associated with the Himalayas. In Jainism, Mount Ashtapada of the Himalayan mountain range is a sacred place where the first Jain Tirthankara, Rishabhanatha, attained moksha. It is believed that after Rishabhanatha attained nirvana, his son, Bharata, had constructed 3 stupas and 24 shrines of the 24 Tirthankaras with their idols studded with precious stones over there and named it Sinnishta. For the Hindus, the Himalayas are personified as Himavat, the king of all mountains and the father of the goddess Parvati. The Himalayas are also considered to be the father of the goddess Ganga, the personification of river Ganges. Two of the most sacred places of pilgrimage for the Hindus are the temple complex in Pashupatinath and Muktanath, also known as Shaligrama because of the presence of the sacred black rocks called Shaligrams. The Buddhists also lay a great deal of importance on the Himalayas. Parotaksang is the holy place where Buddhism started in Bhutan. The Muktanath is also a place of pilgrimage for the Tibetan Buddhists. They believe that the trees in the poplar grove came from the walking sticks of 84 ancient Indian Buddhist magicians or Mahasiddhas. They consider the Shaligrams to be representatives of the Tibetan serpent deity known as Gawo Jagpa. The Himalayan people's diversity shows in many different ways. It shows through their architecture, their languages and dialects, their beliefs and rituals, as well as their clothing. The shapes and materials of the people's homes reflect their practical needs and beliefs. Another example of the diversity amongst the Himalayan peoples is that hand-woven textiles display colors and patterns unique to their ethnic backgrounds. Finally, some people place great importance on jewelry. The Ai and Limbu women wear big gold earrings and nose rings to show their wealth through their jewelry. Several places in the Himalayas are of religious significance in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. A notable example of a religious site is Parotaksang, where Padmasambhava is said to have founded Buddhism in Bhutan. A number of Vajrayana Buddhist sites are situated in the Himalayas, in Tibet, Bhutan, and in the Indian regions of Ladakh, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, Spiti, and Darjeeling. There were over 6,000 monasteries in Tibet, including the residence of the Dalai Lama. Bhutan, Sikkim, and Ladakh are also dotted with numerous monasteries. Resources, edit. The Himalayas are home to a diversity of medicinal resources. Plants from the forests have been used for millennia to treat conditions ranging from simple coughs to snake bites. Different parts of the plant's root, flower, stem, leaves, and bark are used as remedies for different ailments. For example, a bark extract from an Abies pindroo tree is used to treat coughs and bronchitis. Leaf and stem paste from an Androcan cordifolia is used for wounds and as an antidote for snake bites. The bark of a Caulocarpa arborea is used for skin ailments. Nearly a fifth of the gymnosperms, angiosperms, and pteridophytes in the Himalayas are found to have medicinal properties, and more are likely to be discovered. Most of the population in some Asian and African countries depends on medicinal plants rather than prescriptions and such. Since so many people use medicinal plants as their only source of healing in the Himalayas, the plants are an important source of income. This contributes to economic and modern industrial development both inside and outside the region. The only problem is that locals are rapidly clearing the forests on the Himalayas for wood, often illegally. See also, edit. 1. Eastern and Western Himalaya. 2. Indian Himalayan region. 3. List of Himalayan peaks and passes. 4. List of Himalayan topics. 5. List of mountains in India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal and China. 6. List of ultras of the Himalayas. 7. Trekking peak. Notes, edit. 1.